The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of the small, two-bedroom house on the edge of town. It wasn't much: peeling paint, creaky floors, and a roof that leaked when it rained. But for Ethan, Liam, and Sophie Miller, it was home. Ethan, the eldest by 3 minutes, was already awake. At just 9 years old, he carried himself like someone much older. He shook his brother Liam awake, tugging at the blanket. "Come on, lazy bones. If we don't hurry, Aunt Maggie's gonna yell." Liam groaned, his sandy blonde hair sticking up in every direction. 5 more minutes! He pulled the blanket back over his head, but Sophie, the youngest, poked her head in from the hallway. "Breakfast smells like pancakes," she announced proudly, her brown eyes wide with excitement. That got Liam moving. The three of them sat down at the tiny kitchen table, already a bit wobbly from years of use. Maggie Collins, their aunt and guardian, placed 3 plates of pancakes in front of them. She was a stout woman in her 50s, her once-dark hair streaked with gray. Her face carried the lines of someone who'd worked hard all her life, but her eyes were sharp, watchful, almost secretive. "You three eat up," she said briskly, pouring coffee into her mug. "School bus'll be here in 20 minutes. Sophie nibbled at her pancake before whispering, "Aunt Maggie, did Mom ever make pancakes like these?" Maggie froze for a second, her hand tightening around the coffee mug. She forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Don't go filling your heads with nonsense. I'm the one raising you now. That's what matters." Ethan frowned, glancing at his siblings. It wasn't the first time Sophie had asked about their mother, and it wasn't the first time Maggie had dodged the question. They knew almost nothing about her, only that she was gone. But gone where, gone how, Maggie never said. As they finished breakfast, Ethan slipped his worn backpack over his shoulders. The strap was fraying at the edges, and one zipper was broken, but he didn't complain. He never did. He saw it as his job to protect Liam and Sophie, not to make things harder for Aunt Maggie, even if she could be cold sometimes. Walking to the bus stop, Liam kicked a rock down the sidewalk, his thoughts drifting. "You think our mom was nice?" he asked suddenly. Ethan hesitated. "I don't know." "I think she was," Sophie said softly, clutching her backpack straps tight. "I think she'd tell me I was pretty. Aunt Maggie never says that." Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't like when Sophie talked like that. It made his chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. But deep down, he wondered the same things. Why had their mom left? Did she even care? The bus screeched to a stop, snapping them out of their thoughts. As the three climbed aboard, none of them noticed the woman across town who would soon turn their world upside down, Grace Miller, the mother they'd never known, who had never stopped searching for them. The cane tapped softly against the cracked pavement as Grace Miller made her way down Main Street. She moved carefully, listening to the shuffle of passing feet, the hum of engines, the rustle of leaves. Darkness surrounded her, but she had long since learned to navigate the world through sound, touch, and memory. Still, some days were harder than others. Grace had once imagined her life would be filled with laughter, little voices calling her mom, tiny hands clutching her fingers, bedtime stories whispered into the quiet. She had imagined birthday parties, scraped knees she could kiss better, and endless hugs. She had those dreams in her arms once. For a fleeting moment she had held them, 3 perfect newborns, her triplets. And then they were gone. Grace rarely spoke about what happened. Few people in town knew her story, and fewer still cared enough to ask. 9 years ago, after a complicated birth, she'd been told her babies hadn't survived. She begged for one last look, one last touch, but the hospital staff insisted it wasn't possible. Her heart had shattered in that sterile room. She tried to move on, but the grief never left her. Then came the accident, one rainy night, too many tears clouding her vision, a slip on the road. She woke in a hospital bed days later, her sight gone forever. Some said fate had been cruel to her. Grace thought of it differently. She believed God had left her alive for a reason. She just hadn't figured out what it was. Her apartment was small, tucked above a laundromat. The walls were bare, the furniture second-hand. Each morning she folded her cane and set it by the door before making her way to work. The diner on Fifth Street gave her a job bussing tables, and though she couldn't see the dirty plates, she could feel them and carry them with steady hands. Most customers ignored her, but the kind ones left extra tips, murmuring, "Bless you, ma'am." In the evenings, Grace sat by the window, feeling the warmth of the setting sun against her skin. She thought of her children then. Were they really gone, or had someone lied? A mother always knows. In her dreams, she still heard their cries. Sometimes she woke in the night, convinced she felt the brush of a small hand against her cheek. She would whisper their names, the names she had chosen in her heart but never got to speak aloud. Ethan, Liam, Sophie. It was foolish, she told herself. 9 years had passed. Even if they had lived, what were the chances she'd ever find them? She was blind, poor, and alone. And yet, a part of her refused to let go. That morning, Grace left her apartment a little earlier than usual. Something tugged at her chest, an urgency she couldn't explain. As she tapped her cane along the sidewalk, she paused at the corner of a busy intersection. Cars whizzed past, horns blaring. The light had changed, but she couldn't tell. She gripped her cane tighter, hesitating. Fear pricked her skin. Crossing here was dangerous without someone to guide her. She was about to retreat when she heard 3 young voices behind her. "Excuse me, ma'am," a boy said. "Do you need help?" Grace's heart skipped. She didn't know it yet, but the next few minutes would change everything. Grace's cane trembled slightly as she stood at the edge of the street. The sound of rushing cars, squealing brakes, and impatient horns pressed in on her from every side. Her heart raced. She hated intersections like this, too wide, too loud, too unpredictable. One wrong step and she could be lost in the chaos. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice was small but clear, cutting through the noise. A boy's voice. Grace tilted her head, startled. "Yes." "We can help you," another voice chimed in, gentler, younger. Then a third, "Don't worry, we've got you." Before she could respond, a warm little hand slipped into hers. Another brushed against her arm. A third tugged lightly at her sleeve. Grace's breath caught in her throat, 3 of them. Her cane lowered to the ground as the children guided her forward. Step by step, they led her across, their voices filling the air. "Careful, there's a bump." "Okay, now step up, curb's right here." "You're safe, ma'am." Their confidence steadied her trembling knees. She trusted them completely, as if she had known their touch all her life. When they reached the other side, Grace exhaled a shaky breath of relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means to me." "You're welcome," the first boy said proudly. "I'm Ethan." "I'm Liam," said the second. "And I'm Sophie," the little girl added, her voice light and sweet. Grace froze. The names struck her like thunder in her chest. Ethan, Liam, Sophie. Her cane slipped from her hand as she reached out blindly. May I touch your faces?" The children exchanged a quick look. Ethan frowned but nodded cautiously. Sure." Grace's trembling hands lifted, brushing against Ethan's cheek first. Strong jaw for his age, a small scar near his temple, something inside her screamed recognition. Her fingers moved to Liam, softer features, a dimple she could feel. She gasped, choking back a sob. And then Sophie. The little girl's hair brushed against Grace's knuckles as she cupped her face. Delicate chin, button nose, familiar shape of her eyes. Grace's knees buckled. "Oh, God," tears poured down her cheeks. "It can't be, but it is. You're mine." Ethan pulled back slightly, confused. "Yours." "My children," Grace whispered hoarsely, clutching Sophie's tiny hands. "I lost you. They told me you were gone, but here you are." Liam blinked, uncertain. "You mean you're our mom?" Grace nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I'm your mother." The triplets stood frozen, caught between disbelief and something deeper, something they couldn't name. Sophie's lips trembled. "But Aunt Maggie said our mom was gone." Grace shook her head fiercely. "No, baby, I never stopped looking. I never stopped loving you." People on the sidewalk had begun to stare, some whispering, some pointing. But Grace didn't care. She wrapped her arms around all three children, pulling them close, sobbing into their hair. For the first time in 9 years, she felt whole again. And yet, as Ethan stiffened in her embrace, a shadow of doubt crossed his face. The triplets had found their mother, but what did that mean for the life they already knew? The children stared at Grace, their small bodies pressed together, unsure whether to step closer or pull away. Ethan's brow furrowed. He had always been the skeptical one, the protector. You can't just say you're our mom," he said firmly, pulling Sophie back a little. "Lots of people say things. Aunt Maggie told us our mom's gone." Grace's chest tightened. She reached toward his voice, desperate for him to feel the truth in her touch. "I know what Maggie told you, sweetheart, but she was wrong. I am your mother. I felt it the moment I touched your faces. I know it in my soul." Sophie's big brown eyes shimmered with tears. "But how? Where were you all this time?" Grace's lips trembled. How could she explain years of heartbreak to children so young? She took a shaky breath. "When you were born, the doctors told me you didn't survive. I begged them, I cried, but they wouldn't let me hold you. They lied to me. And then," her voice broke, "then an accident took my sight. I thought I'd lost you forever." Liam's mouth fell open. "Wait, you mean they stole us, like for real?" Grace nodded, her hands clutching her cane as if it might anchor her. "I don't know who did it or why, but I never stopped searching. I prayed every night that one day, somehow, I'd find you. And today, God brought me to you." The children stood in silence, trying to make sense of it all. Ethan's jaw tightened. He wanted to believe her. Something deep inside whispered she was telling the truth, but his loyalty to Maggie pulled at him. "Aunt Maggie wouldn't lie to us," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Grace reached out, and this time Ethan didn't pull away. She cupped his cheek, her thumb brushing against his skin. "I don't blame Maggie," she said softly. "Maybe she thought she was protecting you, but I am your mother. My heart has always known it." Sophie slipped from Ethan's grasp and threw her arms around Grace's waist. "I believe you," she whispered into her coat. "You feel like my mom." Grace's tears flowed freely as she held her daughter tight. Liam, standing beside Ethan, bit his lip. "If you're really our mom, prove it. Tell us something only a mom would know." Grace's mind raced. Then slowly she smiled through her tears. "When you were babies, you each had something special. Ethan, you were born with a tiny scar just above your right temple. Liam, you had the sweetest little dimple on your left cheek that showed every time you yawned. And Sophie," Grace's voice softened, breaking. "Sophie had the softest cry, almost like a song. The nurse said it was the gentlest she'd ever heard." The triplets froze. Ethan's hand unconsciously touched the scar on his temple. Liam's eyes widened, his dimple flashing faintly as his mouth opened in shock. Sophie pressed her face deeper into Grace's coat, sobbing. A hush fell over the busy street. Passers-by, sensing the gravity of the moment, stopped whispering. Grace tightened her arms around the children. "I am your mother, and if you'll let me, I'll never let you go again." For the first time, Ethan's stern expression softened. He didn't say he believed her, not yet, but he didn't pull away either. Something was changing. The triplets clung to her hands as if afraid she might disappear again. But Ethan's eyes were sharp, filled with questions that demanded answers. Grace knew she owed them the truth, even if it broke her heart all over again. She sank onto a nearby bench, her cane resting against her leg. The children gathered around her. Her fingers trembled as they brushed over their hair, their shoulders, proof they were real. Proof she hadn't been living a fantasy all these years. "When you were born," Grace began, her voice quiet but steady, "it was the happiest moment of my life. 3 beautiful babies, my Ethan, Liam, and Sophie. I was scared, of course. I was young, alone, and your father wasn't in the picture. But when I held you in my arms, I knew I could face anything." Her sightless eyes lifted toward the sound of the passing cars, but she was seeing a different scene, the hospital room 9 years ago. "You were so tiny," she whispered, her voice catching. I remember counting your fingers and toes. I remember thinking you were miracles, but then something happened. The triplets leaned closer, holding their breath. After the delivery, I was weak, fading in and out. A nurse came and told me you hadn't survived. I begged her to let me see you to say goodbye, but she refused. She said it would only break me more. Grace's hands clenched into fists. I didn't understand. Nothing made sense. I screamed, I cried, I demanded answers, but they gave me none. And then they took you away. Sophie gasped softly, tears filling her eyes. That's so mean. Grace nodded, her voice thick with emotion. I thought I had lost you forever. For weeks I could barely breathe. My heart felt empty. And then, she took a shaky breath. The accident happened. I was walking home one night, blinded by my tears. A car swerved onto the sidewalk. I don't remember much, only pain and then darkness. When I woke up in the hospital, I couldn't see any more. Ethan's face hardened, trying to piece it together. So, you thought we were dead, but we weren't. Someone lied. Yes, Grace whispered fiercely. Someone stole you from me. I don't know who or why, but I've lived every day since then with the ache of not knowing. I searched in every way I could. I asked questions, knocked on doors, begged for answers, but no one helped. They all told me to let it go, that my babies were gone. She reached out, and this time Ethan didn't pull back. She touched his cheek, her thumb resting on his scar. But a mother's heart knows. I never stopped believing, and now here you are, my miracles. Liam swallowed hard, looking at Ethan. So Aunt Maggie knew something? She had to write. Grace's lips pressed together. I don't know yet, but I will find out. Sophie threw her arms around Grace again, clinging to her as if afraid she'd vanish. Grace kissed the top of her head, her tears soaking into Sophie's hair. For the first time in 9 years, the hollow ache inside her chest eased. She wasn't whole yet, not until the truth came out, not until her children were safe with her. But she wasn't empty anymore either. The darkness of her world hadn't lifted, but for the first time, Grace could feel the light. By the time Grace and the triplets reached their small neighborhood, the evening sky had deepened into shades of violet and blue. The children clutched Grace's hands tightly, guiding her toward the worn steps of the brick townhouse they called home. Inside, the scent of cooking stew filled the air. Maggie, their caretaker, stood in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled up, stirring a pot with practiced ease. Her graying hair was tied back, her face lined from years of hard work and worry. When the door opened, Maggie turned with a warm smile until she saw Grace. Her spoon clattered against the counter. What are you doing here?" Sophie rushed forward. "Aunt Maggie, we found her. We found our mom." Maggie's face went pale, her eyes darting between the children and the blind woman standing in her doorway. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron, masking her shock. "Kids, that's enough nonsense. You don't know what you're talking about." But Ethan stepped forward, his voice firm. "It's not nonsense. She knew about my scar, Liam's dimple, Sophie's cry. She knew, and she said the hospital lied." Grace's fingers tightened around her cane, her jaw trembling. "Maggie, why? Why didn't you tell me my babies were alive?" Maggie's lips thinned. For a moment, guilt flickered in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by steel. "Because you weren't ready," she snapped. "You had nothing, Grace. No money, no home, no husband. You were broken, blind. How was I supposed to hand over 3 helpless infants to you?" The children gasped, their wide eyes flicking between the 2 women. Grace's voice broke, trembling with fury and grief. "You stole them from me. You had no right." "I saved them," Maggie shot back. "I gave them food, a roof, clothes, school. I made sure they survived. What could you have given them, Grace? A life of poverty. A blind woman struggling to care for 3 babies. Grace's cane tapped the floor as her anger surged. "I could have given them love. I could have given them their mother, and you robbed us all of that." Sophie tugged at Maggie's apron, her voice small and shaking. "Aunt Maggie, is it true? Did you lie?" Maggie's face softened, her shoulders sagging. "I did what I thought was best. You don't understand. You were so tiny. Grace was weak, broken from the accident. She couldn't even care for herself. I thought I was protecting you." Ethan's jaw clenched. Protecting us doesn't mean lying to us our whole lives. Liam, usually the quiet one, finally spoke. His voice was low, trembling with hurt. We had the right to know who our mom was. Maggie's eyes welled with tears, but her pride held. I gave you everything I could. If that makes me the villain, so be it. Grace reached forward, her hand brushing the air until she found Sophie's shoulder. I don't want to take you away from the woman who raised you, but I am your mother, and I will fight with every breath in me to have a place in your lives. The room fell into heavy silence. The children huddled together, their faces torn between love for the woman who raised them and longing for the mother they'd been denied. For the first time, Maggie's voice broke. Grace, if you want them back, you'll have to prove you can give them more than just words. Grace straightened, her blind eyes fierce, her grip on her cane unshakable. Then that's exactly what I'll do. The next morning, Grace woke with a weight pressing against her chest. She could still hear Maggie's harsh words echoing in her mind. You'll have to prove you can give them more than just words. Her children were hers by blood, but she knew Maggie was right about one thing. Love alone wouldn't erase the years of absence, nor silence the doubts about whether she could care for them. Grace sat on the edge of her small bed, her cane across her lap. For a moment she allowed herself to weep silently. Then she took a long breath, wiped her tears, and whispered to herself, For Ethan, Liam, and Sophie, I have to be stronger. That afternoon, Grace joined the children in the living room. Maggie sat stiffly in a chair, arms folded, watching every move like a hawk. Mom, Ethan said carefully, we can help you. You don't have to do everything alone. Grace shook her head gently. I don't want you to feel like caretakers. I want to show you that I can be your mother, not your burden. She stood holding her cane and felt her way toward the kitchen. Dinner, she said, her voice trembling only slightly. I'll cook tonight. Maggie scoffed. Grace, you'll burn the house down. But the triplets jumped to their feet. We'll help her, Sophie said quickly. We can be her eyes. Inside the kitchen, Grace insisted on doing as much as possible on her own. She ran her hands across the counters, memorizing where everything was, the knife block, the cutting board, the spice jars. She listened carefully to the sizzle of the stove, the bubbling of water. Ethan guided her hand toward the carrots. Here, Mom, careful. Grace steadied the knife, slicing slowly, methodically. She wasn't fast, but each cut was precise. Liam stirred the pot while Sophie sprinkled salt under Grace's direction. When the stew was finally ready, the rich aroma filled the room. Grace carried the pot carefully to the table, her steps cautious but determined. Maggie stared, her expression unreadable. The children dug in eagerly. Ethan grinned. This is better than Maggie's. Hey, Maggie snapped, but there was the faintest twitch of a smile on her lips. Grace laughed softly, her face glowing with pride. See, I can do more than just words. Later that week, Grace took another step. With Daniel Harris's help, she enrolled in a program for the blind that offered training in independent living and even job placement. The triplets watched her practice using voice-assisted software, learning how to type, and organizing her space with labeled containers. Sophie clapped when her mother navigated the room without stumbling. You're amazing. Grace pulled her daughter close. I want you to be proud of me, not because I'm perfect, but because I won't give up. Maggie lingered at the doorway, her stern facade softening as she watched Grace. For the first time, she began to see not the broken woman she once pitied, but a mother fighting to reclaim what she had lost. That night, Grace tucked the children into bed for the first time. She kissed Ethan's forehead, brushed Liam's hair back, and held Sophie's tiny hand. Good night, my loves, she whispered. Good night, Mom, they chorused, their voices filled with warmth that no doubt could erase. Grace stepped back into the hall, her heart swelling. For the first time in years, she felt whole. And Maggie, quiet, reflective, whispered under her breath, maybe, just maybe, you can. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Grace had begun to prove herself in small but steady ways, cooking meals, walking with confidence using her cane, and learning to use assistive technology. The triplets grew closer to her with every passing day, but Maggie's doubts lingered like a shadow. Then came the knock on the door. Daniel Harris, the lawyer who had first believed Grace's story, stood on the porch holding a thick envelope. His expression was serious but excited. "Grace," he said, "I have something you need to hear." They gathered in the living room, the triplets leaning forward eagerly, Maggie crossing her arms with suspicion. Daniel laid the documents on the table. "I tracked down the hospital records from the night your children were born," he explained. "They confirm what you always suspected. Your babies were marked as deceased by mistake. The paperwork was tampered with, likely to cover incompetence." Grace gasped, her hand trembling as it brushed the papers. Ethan squeezed her shoulder. "See, Mom, you were right all along." But Daniel wasn't finished. "There's more." He pulled out another document, this one stamped with an official seal. "Grace, your late husband's estate was never properly closed. He was the sole heir to the Montgomery fortune, a corporate empire worth nearly $90 million. By law, his heirs, your children, are entitled to it." The room went silent. Maggie's mouth fell open. The children blinked at one another, stunned. Grace pressed her hand against her chest, her blind eyes wide with shock. "Are you saying?" Liam whispered. Daniel nodded. "Yes, Ethan, Liam, and Sophie are legally recognized heirs, and Grace, as their mother, you're their guardian." Maggie stumbled back into her chair, her face drained of color. "All these years, all this time I thought I was protecting them from poverty, and they were heirs to millions." Grace's voice was low, shaking. "I never wanted money, I just wanted my babies." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Unfortunately, the Montgomery family doesn't see it that way. They're contesting custody, claiming you're unfit to raise the heirs. They've already filed in court." The triplets froze, fear washing over their faces. Sophie's lip quivered. "They can't take us away, right, Mom?" Grace swallowed hard, forcing her voice to steady. "No one will take you from me, not again." But inside, her heart raced. She knew the Montgomerys were powerful, wealthy, and ruthless. Maggie finally spoke, her voice heavy with regret. "Grace, I may not have agreed with you before, but you're their mother. And those people, those billionaires, they'll treat the kids like trophies, not children." She met Grace's blind gaze with fierce determination. "You can't fight them alone, and I won't let them win." For the first time, the two women shared a fragile alliance, born not of trust, but of love for the same three children. Daniel nodded. "Then we prepare for court, but you should know the Montgomery lawyers will tear apart every detail of your life. They'll question your blindness, your finances, your past. You'll need to prove you can give these children a future not just filled with love, but with stability." Grace lifted her chin, her grip on her cane steady. "Then that's what I'll do. I'll fight them with everything I have." Ethan, Liam, and Sophie threw their arms around her, holding tight. In that moment, the tiny living room felt like a fortress, bound not by wealth but by unbreakable love. Still, Grace knew the real battle was only just beginning. The courthouse was grand and intimidating, its marble pillars towering like silent judges before the trial even began. Grace stood outside with her cane, her children holding each of her hands. Ethan stood on one side, tall and protective, while Liam and Sophie clung close on the other. Daniel Harris adjusted his tie, his voice steady but urgent. "Remember, Grace, today is about proving one thing, that love and stability matter more than wealth or status. Don't let them rattle you." Grace nodded, her blind eyes hidden behind dark glasses. "They can take everything else, but they won't take my children." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. On one side sat Grace, Maggie, and the triplets. On the other, the Montgomery family, flawless in designer suits, their lawyers sharp as blades. The judge, a stern man with silver hair, entered. "This court will hear the case of Montgomery Estate versus Grace Miller, regarding custody of Ethan, Liam, and Sophie Miller." The Montgomery attorney rose first, his voice booming. Your Honor, while we respect Ms. Miller's condition, it is clear she cannot provide the environment these heirs require. The Montgomery family has resources, wealth, and influence to raise the children in luxury, as their bloodline demands. Ms. Miller is blind, unemployed, and incapable of safeguarding their inheritance. Grace's fists clenched under the table, but she stayed silent. Then Daniel stood. His tone was calm, but every word carried weight. Your Honor, love is not measured in millions. These children were stolen from their mother by lies and negligence. For years, Grace Miller has lived believing her babies were gone, yet she never stopped searching. Despite her blindness, she has proven capable, cooking meals, maintaining a home, training for employment. What she offers is not money, but unconditional love and stability. The judge nodded slowly, scribbling notes. The Montgomery lawyer smirked. Love is admirable, Mr. Harris, but it won't pay for tutors, universities, security, or the responsibilities of a nine-figure estate. At that, Ethan suddenly stood, his voice breaking. We don't care about money, we just want our mom. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge raised a brow. Son, please remain seated. But Sophie burst out next, her small voice trembling. She tucks us in at night. She cooks for us. She knows us. The Montgomerys don't even know our favorite colors. The room fell silent. Even the polished Montgomery family shifted uncomfortably. Finally, Grace rose to speak. Her cane tapped softly as she faced the judge. Her voice was quiet at first, but grew with every word. I may not see with my eyes, Your Honor, but I see my children in ways no billionaire ever could. I know the way Ethan shields his siblings when he thinks they're scared. I know Liam hums when he's nervous. I know Sophie cries softly into her pillow because she doesn't want anyone to hear. I know them because I am their mother, and I will fight until my last breath to raise them. The judge leaned back, studying her with grave intensity. The courtroom was silent, every soul hanging on his decision. At last he spoke. The court will adjourn for deliberation. A verdict will be given tomorrow morning. As the gavel struck, Grace's knees trembled. The triplets rushed to her, wrapping their arms around her waist. For that moment, it didn't matter what the judge said, because they were together and no one could take that love away. The next morning, the courthouse felt colder than ever. Grace sat on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, her cane resting across her lap. The triplets huddled around her, whispering words of comfort, though their own fear was written in their eyes. Maggie sat nearby, unusually quiet, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Daniel arrived with a solemn expression. The judge has reviewed everything. This will be quick but not easy. Stay strong. The doors creaked open and everyone filed in. The Montgomerys entered like royalty, their expensive colognes and silk suits filling the air with arrogance. Grace's heart hammered, but she held her head high. The judge entered, his gavel striking. This court reconvenes to deliver its ruling in the matter of custody for Ethan, Liam, and Sophie Miller. Every breath in the room seemed to freeze. The judge adjusted his glasses, glancing from the Montgomerys to Grace. The Montgomery family has argued that wealth and resources should determine the children's guardianship. However, the law and this court recognizes that money cannot replace a mother's love. Grace Miller, despite her blindness, has shown extraordinary determination to provide stability, care, and devotion to her children. Grace's hands shook. Sophie squeezed her fingers, whispering, "It's okay, Mom." The judge continued. Therefore, custody of Ethan, Liam, and Sophie Miller is hereby awarded to their biological mother, Grace Miller. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, protests, whispers, but Grace heard only the cries of joy from her children. Ethan threw his arms around her waist. "We did it, Mom." Liam buried his face against her side, tears streaming. "We're really staying with you." Sophie clung to her hand, sobbing. I knew it." Grace dropped to her knees, wrapping them all in a trembling embrace. "My babies, no one will ever take you from me again." The Montgomery attorney sputtered. "But Your Honor, what of the inheritance?" The judge struck his gavel again. The inheritance will be held in trust until the children come of age. Ms. Miller will remain their guardian. Case closed. The gavel slammed, sealing their victory. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed, questions flew. Grace, how will you raise them? What about the fortune? What message do you have for other mothers? Grace lifted her chin, her blind eyes hidden but her voice steady. Money didn't bring me back to my children. Love did. That's all that matters. The crowd fell silent at the raw truth in her words. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You fought harder than anyone thought possible. You've won more than custody. You've won your family back. Maggie, who had once stood against her, stepped forward hesitantly. Grace, I was wrong. Her voice cracked. I thought I was protecting them, but I see now I was only protecting myself. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Grace reached out, finding Maggie's hand. You gave them love when I couldn't. For that, I'll always be grateful. But now, it's my turn. For the first time in years, Maggie smiled softly. Take good care of them. They deserve you. That evening back in their modest home, Grace cooked dinner with the triplets at her side. The pot simmered, laughter echoed, and for once there was no weight of doubt or fear, only peace. As she tucked them into bed, Ethan whispered, Mom. Yes, sweetheart. Today you proved to everyone you can do it, but we already knew. Grace's throat tightened as she kissed his forehead, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it again and again. Liam yawned, curling under his blanket. You don't have to, Mom. You just being here is enough. Sophie clutched Grace's hand until she drifted off. Grace lingered, listening to their soft breaths. For years, she had lived in darkness, alone, broken, believing she had lost everything. But now, even without sight, her world was filled with light again. She stepped into the hallway, her cane tapping softly, her heart steady. She was no longer just Grace Miller, the blind woman. She was Grace Miller, mother, protector, fighter. And nothing would ever take that away.